The pen touched the paper, the final signature settled beneath the royal seal, and in that single quiet moment, a young woman who had spent her entire life standing carefully outside the brightest glare of the crown was suddenly pulled into the center of it. King Charles had signed a historic decree formally elevating Lady Louise Windsor as Princess of Edinburgh, and behind the palace doors, the decision landed with a force no one in the family had fully prepared for. This was not just another title added to the royal register. This was not a decorative adjustment, a ceremonial flourish, or a polite reward given to a young royal because of bloodline and tradition. This was a command carrying the formal authority of the monarch. The moment the decree was signed, Louise's place inside the royal structure changed. The quiet life her parents had fought so carefully to protect was no longer simply hers. It now belonged, at least in part, to the institution. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you do not miss a single update, because this decision is not just about Louise. It is about the future of the working monarchy, the survival of the Edinburgh legacy, and the emotional cost of turning a private young woman into a public symbol. Charles remained silent after signing. He knew exactly what the decree meant. A royal decree is not a suggestion. It is a written order carrying the monarch's formal power, and this one took effect immediately. It changed Louise's status, but more importantly, it tied her to a legacy larger than herself. The document connected her directly to the Edinburgh name carried by her parents, Prince Edward and Sophie, and to Prince Philip, whose discipline, restraint, and belief in service had shaped the family's understanding of duty for generations. The king had placed the future of that legacy on Louise's shoulders. When the document reached the family, Louise was sitting beside Sophie. She read the final line once, then read it again, almost as if repetition might soften what the words were demanding from her. It did not. The page remained cold, official, and impossible to argue with. The young woman lowered the document slowly and admitted what everyone in the room could already see on her face. She was frightened. Not frightened only by the title. Not frightened only by the public attention. Frightened by how quickly the crown could consume the private life she had protected for so long. Sophie moved closer, wanting to comfort her daughter, but even she could not promise that everything would remain unchanged. She had raised Louise to understand duty, but also to protect her own identity. Now those two values were colliding in the same room. Across from them, Edward watched in silence, pride and unease fighting across his face. He wanted to reach for his daughter, but his hand stopped against the arm of the chair. He understood something painful. Reassurance could not remove the burden Charles had created. Louise had inherited more than a style. She had inherited expectation. The decree did not simply change how she would be addressed. It included a ceremonial role and official responsibilities representing the crown at national events. That meant the title came with duties beyond occasional appearances, beyond family celebrations, beyond symbolic presence. It marked the beginning of a gradual but unmistakable movement toward royal service. William received his copy before the public announcement. He noticed a sealed appendix beneath the main decree and broke its fastening. Inside, he found instructions outlining engagements, training, public preparation, and a carefully phased route toward greater royal service. Charles had not made this decision impulsively. He had considered it for months, perhaps longer. The future king read one passage twice, then closed the file without speaking. He understood what the secrecy meant. While Louise had believed her future still belonged to her, the palace had already been planning how to use it. Sophie looked toward Edward and asked the question hanging over all of them. Why now? What had convinced the monarch that their daughter could no longer remain near the edges of royal duty? Why had the quiet young woman who never chased attention suddenly become important enough for a historic decree? Louise heard every word. The fear in her expression sharpened into something more controlled, something closer to determination. If the crown had chosen her, then she needed to understand why. If the king had rewritten her future, then she needed to know whether he had seen her as a person or simply as an answer to a royal problem. To understand why King Charles placed such extraordinary faith in Louise, the story has to move beyond the decree and into the private lives of the people changed by that single signature. Lady Louise Windsor had never chased a title. She had never demanded a palace apartment, never behaved as though royal blood entitled her to special treatment, and never shaped her life around applause. That was exactly why Charles trusted her. Her restraint, loyalty, patience, and silence made her appear ideal for the crown. But those same qualities also left her least prepared to resist it. As her parents tried to process what had happened, Louise began to understand something disturbing. Royal confidence could feel very similar to royal captivity. She had grown up at the edge of the working monarchy. She was close enough to understand its pressure, but distant enough to build a life beyond it. She had focused on her education, found freedom in carriage driving, and learned to move through royal life without letting it define every part of her. The working monarchy, the small group of family members who perform official duties on behalf of the sovereign, had never been the center of her ambitions. Edward and Sophie had encouraged that distance deliberately. They wanted their daughter to respect service without becoming dependent on status. They wanted her to understand privilege without being swallowed by it. They wanted her to value responsibility without losing her ordinary self. That was the private achievement they had protected for years. Now the decree threatened to undo it. Later, Sophie entered Louise's bedroom quietly and found her daughter sitting beside an unopened jewelry case. The room felt still, almost suspended. Sophie had expected questions about the announcement, about protocol, about what would happen next. But Louise spoke first. She admitted that she was afraid of losing the ordinary identity her mother had fought so hard to protect. She did not fear responsibility itself. She feared becoming a symbol before she had finished becoming a person. Sophie sat beside her and placed a hand over hers. It was the gesture of a mother trying to hold back an institution with nothing but love. But even that could not erase the truth pressing against them both. The palace had moved. The decree existed. The title was no longer theoretical. Edward felt pride, but it came with a sharp edge. The elevation honored his family and strengthened the Edinburgh legacy. Yet he could not ignore what Charles had done. His brother had placed a future upon Louise without first asking whether she wanted to carry it. In a private recorded conversation, Edward later told Sophie that the title felt like both a gift and a command. She understood immediately. The decree described Louise as a continuing representative of the Edinburgh legacy, meaning her service was expected to endure, not appear only at rare ceremonial moments. To the palace, that was continuity. To her parents, it was a lifetime being quietly assigned. Charles saw the hesitation differently. During a private conversation with William, the king argued that Louise's reluctance proved she was exactly what the monarchy needed. People who desired attention could be controlled by applause, he said. But people who avoided attention were often guided by duty. William listened carefully, but he did not answer at once. He remembered a tense royal gathering months earlier, a moment when Louise had stepped forward without instruction and changed the mood of an entire room. It had not been a grand public performance. There had been no cameras, no prepared statement, and no attempt to impress anyone. It was a private act of courage during a ceremony that quietly became the point of no return. The decree did not begin in a council chamber. It did not begin inside a lawyer's carefully drafted file. It began during a private Edinburgh legacy ceremony at Windsor, when a planned tribute started to unravel and the senior royals hesitated. In that uncertain silence, Louise stepped forward. What she said to King Charles afterward lasted less than 3 minutes. But those 3 minutes became the hidden trigger behind the decision that transformed her future. Months earlier, Charles had gathered William, Edward, Sophie, and Louise at Windsor to honor Prince Philip's charitable and equestrian legacy. The Edinburgh Legacy Ceremony was designed to preserve the late Duke's work and pass its values to a new generation. Senior family members were expected to lead the tribute and explain how the Edinburgh name would continue. Louise had only been asked to attend quietly. She had no speech. She held no formal role. She believed the day belonged to her father and the senior royals around him. Then everything began to unravel. A young participant approached with a memorial item but froze before completing the presentation. Her hands shook. Her words disappeared. Charles waited. William looked toward the organizers. The silence grew painful, the kind of silence that makes a room feel larger and colder. Louise did not ask permission. She left her assigned place, moved beside the frightened child, and spoke to her softly until she could breathe again. She guided her through each sentence, never taking the moment away from her, never turning the child's fear into a performance, never using the situation to draw attention to herself. Sophie felt pride rise inside her, but fear followed closely behind. Her daughter had stepped into the center of a royal ceremony without instruction, and she knew Charles was watching. Edward saw something deeper. Louise was not trying to impress the king or claim attention. She had acted because someone vulnerable needed protection. The Duke glanced at his wife, and Sophie understood from his expression that their daughter had just revealed a strength the family could no longer overlook. After the ceremony, Charles asked Louise to remain. The aides withdrew. The door closed. The monarch told her she had displayed the kind of service the crown praised constantly, but rarely showed with such natural honesty. Louise answered without hesitation. She said she had helped because the child was frightened, not because titles, cameras, or royal expectations demanded it. The king carried those words into a private recorded conversation with William later that evening. He repeated them exactly, then ordered a confidential examination into creating the Princess of Edinburgh title, including a formal review of whether Louise could inherit a permanent public role connected to her family's legacy. William understood the significance immediately. Charles had not been moved by ambition. He had been moved by its absence. Yet when Louise eventually learned that one private act of kindness had triggered the decree, gratitude turned into unease. Her compassion had been transformed into obligation, and she could not accept that without asking a question the palace did not want to hear. Before the decree was announced to the world, Louise walked into Charles's private study, determined to ask whether the crown had mistaken compassion for consent. There were no courtiers to soften the words, no cameras to encourage polite smiles, no family members to interrupt. Louise entered carrying the decree against her chest. Charles stood behind his desk, expecting gratitude. Instead, she placed the document before him and asked the question that shattered the ceremony around his decision. "Your Majesty, did I ever truly have a choice?" Charles dismissed the final two aides and closed the door himself. The private audience left Louise alone with the man who had rewritten her future. Only the decree remained between them. The king explained that the Princess of Edinburgh title was meant to protect the values Prince Philip had carried through decades of service: restraint, loyalty, discipline, and continuity. He believed Louise could preserve the Edinburgh household's legacy because she understood duty without chasing recognition. Louise did not move. She told Charles he had taken one sincere act at Windsor and transformed it into a lifelong expectation. Her voice stayed calm, but her hands tightened around the chair as she described the private identity she feared losing. She had helped a frightened child because compassion demanded it, not because she wanted the crown to build a public life around that moment. The young woman respected what the title represented, but she could not pretend respect erased the cost. Charles looked wounded. He had believed the decree would be received as an honor, and Louise's words forced him to confront what ceremony had hidden. The monarch set down his pen and admitted that the crown often presents duty in the language of privilege because acknowledging the sacrifice would make its demands harder to defend. He had wanted to protect the Edinburgh legacy, but he now understood he had asked Louise to protect it before asking whether she was prepared to surrender part of herself. Louise pressed further. Could she refuse the operational responsibilities, regular engagements, preparation, and official work attached to the role while keeping the life she had already built? Charles opened the decree and pointed to a clause she had not seen. It granted her 6 months to define the boundaries of her service. She could choose her causes, control the pace of her appearances, and decide how deeply the title would enter her private world. Then the king revealed something darker. Senior advisors had opposed her elevation, warning that it would disturb established expectations and provoke resentment among relatives who had spent years competing for royal relevance. Louise left without giving him an answer. Outside the study, William was waiting. The prince said nothing, but his guarded expression told her the strongest resistance had never come from advisors alone. Louise had challenged the king and discovered the decree contained room for choice. But the greater danger lay with those who believed Charles had just rewritten the hierarchy of the royal family. A royal decree may carry one signature, but it is never shaped by one will alone. Behind Charles's decision stood private memoranda, arguments over succession, warnings about public reaction, and a growing fear that the monarchy lacked enough trusted figures for the future. Louise's title was not simply a reward. It was Charles's answer to a crisis, and not everyone believed the quiet daughter of Edinburgh should become part of that answer. Charles had watched the circle of dependable working royals grow smaller. The working royals are the family members who carry out official duties for the crown, and their shrinking number mattered because every absence increased pressure on those who remained. The king believed the monarchy needed a younger figure known for discipline rather than scandal. Louise represented precisely that possibility. She brought no history of public conflict, no visible hunger for attention, and no ambition that could overpower the role. William understood the danger from another direction. He agreed that the crown needed reinforcement, but feared the institution was repeating an old mistake, turning a young relative into a public servant before she fully understood the cost. In a private conversation, he warned Charles that loyalty could be mistaken for consent. The monarch listened, But his silence suggested he already believed the greater risk was allowing the monarchy to weaken while a suitable figure remained unused. Sophie soon discovered how deep the debate had gone. When a confidential advisory note reached her, she read a sentence questioning whether Louise possessed enough public authority. Surprise hardened into anger. The trusted confidant folded the document slowly, then asked Edward who had been allowed to judge their daughter's character in secret. The Duke could not answer without exposing how many palace voices had tried to influence the decree, and his hesitation only deepened her fury. Edward carried that anger directly to his brother. During a private recorded exchange, he told Charles that honoring the Edinburgh legacy could not mean forcing Louise to inherit every sacrifice attached to it. The king then revealed the larger purpose behind the title. It had been designed not merely to expand royal coverage, but to prevent the Edinburgh name from becoming a temporary honor that would fade when Edward's own tenure ended. His daughter was being asked to carry continuity itself. William later examined the final draft and found one crucial alteration. Charles had personally removed a clause requiring Louise to become a full-time working royal immediately. The change allowed her service to begin gradually, proving the monarch had anticipated resistance and quietly protected her right to set limits. Yet before the family could fully absorb that compromise, palace officials moved the public announcement forward. Louise received the new schedule with only hours remaining. Choice still existed on paper, but time was being taken away from her. Before Louise could settle the battle inside her own heart, palace machinery began moving, and the title that had existed only on sealed paper was released into a family unprepared for its consequences. At precisely the moment the palace statement appeared, Louise stood beside her mother with her telephone turned face down. Within seconds, the device began vibrating against the table. Messages multiplied. Broadcasters interrupted schedules. Family members demanded explanations. The title Princess of Edinburgh had entered public life, and the young woman carrying it could already feel the walls of her former existence closing behind her. Louise reached for the telephone, then stopped. Sophie watched her daughter's hand hover above it as the official announcement spread beyond palace control. The statement confirmed that the new princess would undertake ceremonial duties while entering a carefully phased program of public service shaped around her education and personal development. Ceremonial duties meant formal appearances performed on behalf of the crown, and their inclusion meant the title came with visible responsibilities rather than private honor alone. Louise could begin gradually, but she could no longer remain unseen. Palace offices moved at once. Officials revised engagement calendars, seating plans, briefing documents, and formal introductions as though her old identity had been erased by a single command. Louise received a newly printed engagement sheet and stared at the unfamiliar name above her schedule. She touched the words with one finger and told Sophie that seeing the title in ink felt more unsettling than hearing Charles pronounce it. Spoken words could disappear. This page made the change feel permanent. Sophie noticed the control leaving her daughter's face and pulled her into an embrace. She promised Louise would remain herself inside their family, even when the institution required strangers to address her differently. The reassurance mattered because the young royal feared more than publicity. She feared every friendship, choice, and ordinary mistake would now be measured against an image of royal perfection she had never created. Edward's telephone vibrated with a message of its own. A senior relative questioned why Louise had been elevated while others remained without clear roles. The Duke deleted it before his daughter could read it, but anger tightened his expression. Sophie saw the change immediately and asked what had happened. He refused to repeat the message, but his silence confirmed that resentment had already entered the family. William contacted Louise personally instead of using an equerry, an official assistant who normally carries messages and arranges royal duties. The prince warned that public admiration would quickly become scrutiny. He urged her not to let advisors, headlines, or family expectations speak in her name before she had chosen what the title should represent. Louise heard concern rather than instruction, and for the first time since the announcement, she felt someone understood the danger beneath the honor. She agreed to meet him alone at Windsor. She believed the future king might be the only person who understood how a title could reshape a life before its bearer was ready. The announcement had made Louise a princess in the eyes of the world. But only one private conversation could determine whether she would become a servant of the title or force the title to serve something larger. William did not meet Louise in a throne room. He chose a small room at Windsor where no aides waited and no official papers sat between them. Louise expected instructions about posture, speeches, and protocol. Instead, William admitted that the most dangerous moment in royal life comes when everyone praises the role while ignoring the person trapped inside it. His honesty changed the meaning of Charles's decree. Louise sat opposite him without ceremony between them. William spoke as her cousin, not as the future king, and that difference mattered. Every conversation since the decree had treated her like a new part of the royal system. This one treated her like a young woman whose life had been altered without warning. The prince explained that a royal title gains strength from the purpose its holder gives it. Without that purpose, ceremony becomes an exhausting performance controlled by advisors, schedules, and competing palace voices. Louise finally admitted what she had been afraid to say aloud. She resented being chosen because she had shown kindness during the Windsor ceremony. One honest act had become evidence that she belonged to the monarchy forever. The new princess feared that every future gesture would now be questioned. A comforting word could be dismissed as strategy. A moment of compassion could be reduced to royal theater. She had acted naturally once, and now the crown expected her to repeat that sincerity while millions judged whether it was real. William did not offer false comfort. He told Louise she could never stop suspicion because public life invites people to doubt even the purest motives. But she could refuse to become artificial. The prince slid a blank sheet of paper across the table and asked her to write 3 causes she would defend even if the title vanished the next morning. Louise hesitated, then wrote, support for young carers, accessible equestrian programs, and educational opportunities for isolated children. William read the list and revealed what Charles had never explained. The king had deliberately left Louise's royal portfolio undefined. A portfolio was the group of causes and duties assigned to a working royal, and that empty space meant her priorities were never supposed to be chosen by the palace. The monarch wanted them to come from her. Louise looked again at the paper. The decree no longer felt only like a command. It had become an opening, a rare chance to shape an institution that normally shaped everyone who entered it. She folded the page, placed it beside her, and decided she would accept the title publicly, but only on terms she could defend. Then William told her the first appearance had been confirmed for the following day. The nation was already waiting. Louise left Windsor no longer asking how she could escape the title, but how she could transform it. The answer would be tested before millions of watching eyes. By sunrise, the country had already chosen its image of the moment. One newspaper filled its front page with a photograph of Louise holding the sealed decree beside the words, "The quiet royal steps forward." At the gates of the palace of Holyrood House, a crowd gathered before her arrival carrying Edinburgh flags and photographs of Prince Philip. Louise saw them from the car and suddenly understood exactly what she had inherited. Headlines multiplied. Broadcasters described the decree as a major expansion of the monarchy's younger generation. Commentators returned repeatedly to her restrained upbringing, refusal to chase attention, and connection to the Edinburgh legacy. Buckingham Palace had chosen an Edinburgh Youth Centre for her first engagement, an official public visit performed on behalf of the Crown. The centre supported young carers and adaptive equestrian programs, allowing people with different physical needs to take part in horse-related activities. Both causes came directly from the private list she had written with William. Louise turned toward Sophie and quietly admitted she felt physically sick. The princess was not frightened of speaking alone. She was frightened of failing people who had already placed hope in her title. Her mother took her hand and reminded her that nervousness did not mean she was unprepared. It meant she understood that the people waiting outside were not props in a royal performance. Sophie held on until her daughter's breathing steadied. Edward waited near the entrance as Louise approached. Pride filled his expression, but the Duke resisted the instinct to guide her forward. He stepped back instead, allowing his daughter to enter before him. The gesture carried a message stronger than any speech. This moment belonged to her. Louise noticed what her father had done, and his quiet faith gave her courage to continue without hiding behind the Edinburgh name he already carried. Then one broadcaster delivered the phrase that changed the national conversation. During a live report, she described Louise as a different model of princess, one defined by usefulness before celebrity. The word spread across broadcasts and public commentary within minutes. Yet the most powerful moment came inside the center, when a young carer told the new princess that responsibility had made her feel invisible. Louise abandoned part of her prepared speech. She promised that her role would begin by recognizing public institutions too often overlooked. The princess spoke without palace language, and the audience heard conviction rather than performance. Charles watched the address privately. The king realized Louise had done far more than accept his decree. She had established the moral terms by which his decision would now be judged, and he could no longer avoid the personal reckoning waiting between them. The applause confirmed that the public could accept a new Princess of Edinburgh. But the final verdict depended on whether Louise and Charles could reconcile the burden he imposed with the purpose she had claimed. That evening, the crowds were gone. The headlines had been printed, and Louise returned to the same room where she had first read the decree in fear. The document still rested on the table, but she no longer looked at it as a sentence imposed upon her. Charles had given her a title shaped by history. Louise had answered by giving that title a conscience, a direction, and a future of her own choosing. Her first engagement had settled the question that once haunted the family. The Princess of Edinburgh title would not become an empty rank or decorative addition to the monarchy. It would represent active service built around young carers, accessible equestrian programs, and children too often left beyond opportunity. The Edinburgh legacy, the tradition of disciplined public work associated with Prince Philip and Louise's parents, would pass into a new generation. But its meaning would be shaped by her convictions, not palace convenience. Charles met Louise after the engagement with none of the certainty he had carried when signing the decree. During their private recorded conversation, the king admitted he should have spoken to her before changing her future. Royal urgency had caused him to treat suitability as consent. He had seen discipline, kindness, and restraint, but failed to ask whether the person carrying those qualities was ready to surrender the safety surrounding them. Louise accepted the apology, but she did not abandon the boundaries she had fought to establish. She confirmed she would carry the title through gradual duties, protected private space, and freedom to speak honestly whenever royal expectations threatened the purpose of her work. The young princess was not rejecting service. She was refusing to let service erase the person performing it. Charles agreed. He presented Louise with the Edinburgh insignia, an official emblem representing her connection to the role and its responsibilities. The monarch did not place it upon her. Instead, he held it forward and waited. Louise reached out and took it herself. That single gesture changed everything. What had begun as duty imposed by royal authority became service accepted through personal choice. Sophie and Edward watched their daughter enter the family room carrying the insignia. The Duke embraced Louise without hesitation, while her mother reminded her that becoming a princess had not erased the thoughtful young woman they had raised. It had simply given that woman a wider field in which to act. Louise did not surrender herself to the crown. She accepted its weight. She established her limits. She transformed the title into a promise of compassionate service. And so the decree that began as a command ended as a covenant. Charles preserved the Edinburgh name. Louise protected her identity. And the monarchy discovered that its strongest future would not be built through unquestioning obedience, but through duty freely and courageously chosen. Thanks for watching. Please do not forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.